All hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm going to start promptly because I'm told I have 45 minutes and faculty speak in 50-minute units. So I've already been, 5 minutes have been stolen from me. So we need to get going right away. I'm John Piper, you can see from here. I want to thank Amy Reyes and the committee for holding this session, and Lisa Barrett, who is here. Where are you, Lisa? Thank you very much. This would not be possible without her because she knows how to do all this stuff. And you know exactly what I mean, stuff. So, the good of the college, 1812 to 2025, and the inauguration of Chip Edmonds. So, the idea was to look at the college from a particular perspective. So this is not a full history of the college, but it is a history that you might call more cultural, more focused on the people, though you'll see a lot of structures in the pictures, for they have been sort of the heart of the college all along from its very beginning as an academy. So, I have a brief introduction to the whole scope of the college's history, and I'm halfway through it, though you don't know it yet. And then we'll talk about the story of the college's life with a focus on the period after it became a seminary in 1848. The Williamsport Academy was founded in 1812. This building, for those of you who know Williamsport, sat on West 3rd Street, about where the water company sits now, West 3rd and Hepburn Street. And it was an octagon school, which was very typical of the early seminaries. It had 8 sides, though it may not look it. Each end is 3-sided. And the purpose of that is to provide more light. We're talking before electricity, when you had candlelight and lamps, candle-lit lamps. And so the more light you could get in, the better. This building had 4 rooms. It was divided roughly in half on the interior, 2 up and 2 down. And it was constructed in 1812-13. The traditional date for the founding of the school is 1812. And although I found a copy of the original warrant dating 1811, I decided it was not my place to change the date of the college. The buildings of the seminary in 1851. This is the only picture I could find. The seminary was founded in 58, and on the left is the second building of the seminary. It existed there on 3rd Street until the 1830s, when wear and tear of an increasingly industrial region of the town forced it to move here on Academy Street, which had been part of the original layout. But this is in Lostock Township. Believe it or not, you're sitting on a hill. And what marks a hill is that it's above the floodplain, which means the water does not reach here. And so this is the original, the second building of the Williamsport Academy on the left, and on the right is the first building of the new seminary. Now you might ask yourself, but they're not built together. A good question. We have some letters from that time from students who say, I wonder why they built the buildings this way, because we have to walk back and forth in the rain and snow from the bedroom on the right to the classroom and food on the left. Why not build them together? So they ended up putting them together. And This is a very interesting picture. And that is when this picture is supposed to have been revealed in this about 1852, 55, 56. The building on the left was not 4 stories. It was 2 stories. They planned to raise it to 4 stories, but they never got used to it, got around to it, never had the money for it. And so this building did not look like this until almost 1870, when a president decided we ought to start looking like our pictures, and made this into what is Old Main. This is Clark Chapel. It's the only building built in the junior college years. It was built in the 1930s. Junior college began in 29, and it's a gift of a woman who wanted to support the college and was persuaded to build a chapel. The chapel had been in Old Main, and so this was a major development. On the left is the student center. All students had lived or done virtually everything in Old Main. And this building, when it was erected in 1955, this is about 1960 picture, this building brought together all of the student activities, including meal times. Meals had all been served in Old Main until Clark Chapel was built, and then the cafeteria, dining hall, was in the basement of Clark Chapel. And so this was a very important building and a focus of the campus. On the right is the academic center. You'll notice all the trees and bushes around it. This is opened in 1968. I'm a little familiar with this building. I came in 1969. And so it looked pretty much like this. Now there are trees and plantings and everything, but some of you may remember it. Those of you who may have been here, anybody here in those years, 68 to 70? Ah, very good. Well, you remember this. And then this. Now, this is the Gateway Center, 2019, and this has a very important image, if you will. This building faces the way the original college faced, the seminary faced. It faces south toward the mountains. Just take a look, and you can see them from here. But around 1900, 1905, the leadership of the college turned the face of the college around, built an entrance on what was then Bennett Street, and looked toward the quad, what was becoming the quad. And so when President Trocti became involved in this, he and I had a conversation, but he was way ahead of me. And so this building faces the way the original campus faced when it became a seminary in 1848. The seal of Lycoming College, it's had different names on it because it was the seal of Williamsport Dickinson Seminary. And it emerged in 1851 or 52, shortly after the seminary emerged, and it was borrowed boldly from Dickinson College because the founder of the school in 1848, Benjamin Creever, had attended Dickinson, did not graduate, but he attended, and he thought the seal was appropriate. So he stole much of the center of the seal. I used the word steel twice. On the top, that is anyone? Telescope representing the sciences. And underneath it is an open book likely presumed to be the Bible, representing the humanities. Arts and sciences, humanities and sciences, from the beginning. And part of it included the study of languages, for example. What's different is that the Dickinson seal has 2 Latin words, and this has 1 Greek word. I could find no evidence of why they chose this, except that Thomas Bowman, who was president, was involved in choosing the seal, and he knew that Benjamin Creever's favorite term in the New Testament was truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. We know the phrase, there it is, and so I like to think that that's where this comes from. The people. I think this is an interesting choice of a theme. I think it's, in some ways, as I got to work with it, a wonderful choice. The focus is not on the curriculum, though the curriculum is important. It's not on the buildings, though the buildings are important. It's really on the people. And a variety of different groups of people are involved. Now, obviously the students, and some of you have been students here, and so they are very important. And you will see as I proceed the faces and names of some students. There are also the faculty. The faculty is the longest serving group in virtually any college's history, longer than trustees. Trustees sometimes serve long time. Now there is a limit to their service. In years, I believe they must retire at the age of 75. There is no retirement age for faculty. There are some living examples of people who are beyond that age, and we won't go there, okay? So there are the students, the faculty, the trustees or directors, as they're sometimes called, and they are an enduring body, the administration and staff. So there are lots and lots of different groups of people, and although what I have to say now will not include absolutely all of them, generally speaking, the focus is on people. I need to say that when I sat down after retirement in 2007 and decided to write a history of the college, I used a history that had been produced by Judge Charles Scott Williams. It was about 120 pages long or so, and so I looked through it. I didn't really study it at first, and I figured I would need about 250 pages or so because we were well beyond the years he wrote about. Then when I got to studying, I realized it was a study of the administration of the college, not the students. It left the students out completely, left most of the faculty out. So when I got done, I had not 300 pages, I had 600 pages. That warns you off, doesn't it? Well, it can give you rest. The Academy founders. They got together in 1811. We have very few records of any meeting. They were all Williamsport citizens. William Wilson, Walton, Caldwell, Greer, Hayes, Brindle, Stewart, and McClure. None of those are names that we really associate with the school. They were laymen, and they were people who wanted a new level of education called the seminary, the academy level of education. Essentially, people went to common schools as long as they learned to read and write and count. Then they farmed, or they went off and read law with someone when they were early teenagers, really. And the academy was to provide a kind of what we might today call college prep course for those that wanted to further their education. And so the academy mission was a school for the education of youth in the English and other languages, note included right away, in the useful arts, sciences, and literature. Sounds a lot like liberal arts to me. And to get into many universities in these days, you needed to do one thing. And I'm sure you cannot guess it, so I'm going to tell you. You needed to read one of the classic Latin fathers and translate the Latin into English. If you could do that, you could get into college. Otherwise, Princeton, for example, wouldn't take you. That's what you had to do. Well, where did you learn that kind of thing? Well, in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, 50s, you learned it at an academy somewhere, or later on at a seminary. You learned that, and then you could go on to a college or university. What we do know about these is that several of them appear very high on the tax rolls. Wilson was the richest man in Williamsport in terms of cash available. We know it because of the way the tax rolls are written. He was not the richest totally. That was Michael Ross, whose wealth was in the land that had not yet been sold to be developed. And Ross's name is not on this. I don't know why. I would like to go back and ask if I could find someone that knew. But the academy founders, and they ran the academy for its first 35 or so years. Into the picture steps Reverend Benjamin Creever. The picture on the left is of him as a relatively young man, and on the right as an older man. And he's the founder of Williamsport Dickinson Seminary. Now, the good of this place does not really lead me to talk about some of the things that happened, but I will just say in passing. The seminary, the academy, fell on hard times in the 1830s. Pennsylvania passed a free public school act. It was one of the last states to do so. And as a consequence, parents did not need to pay to send their kids to an academy. The free public schools also were coeducational. The academy was for men. And so in the 30s, the school began to change. Women emerged in the student body, and finances became more difficult, shall we say. Finally, the school, on the verge of bankruptcy by the early 1840s, the town council bought it, and then discovered they didn't know how to run it. And so they decided to put it up for sale. Benjamin Creever was a clergyman, a circuit rider, had a number of churches. Circuit riding was not for the faint of heart. On horseback, there was no money to pay for inns. You slept in the homes of people that were converted. You may sleep with the animals of the people in the people's homes, and it was just a difficult time. In 1847, his health failed, and he took a year's leave of absence and came to Milton, Pennsylvania, south of here, about 20 miles. And he was interested in doing something, so he and his wife started a school. And then he heard that the Williamsport Academy was for sale. It took him 2 days walking to get from there to here. He came the easy route along the canal rather than the more difficult route up over Route 15 in the hill. All of you, I presume, are familiar with what I'm talking about. Here, he associated himself with several Methodist pastors, and they got some funds together and paid the debt of the school, and the town council voted to give them the school to run. The town council, I've read the minutes, we do have those minutes. Town council was clearly relieved of this burden. Creever was excited. His thought was that this would be a preparatory school for his college. I didn't say alma mater because, as he said in something later, he had to leave because of lack of funds before he graduated. And so Creever and those who bought the school opened it in 1848. There were 4 faculty members. Creever, his wife, who was educated as a teacher, his sister, who was educated as a teacher, and Thomas Bowman, a graduate of Dickinson College that Creever had asked to be the president of the school. Creever never wanted to be in education full time. As soon as he got well, he left the new seminary and went back into the pastoral circuit riding ministry. But Creever never really left Williamsport. Now, this is a cemetery, so you probably know, oh, you mean he's buried here? Yes. But his heart was always in this place, and he would come back periodically to visit. And on one occasion, which I'll get to in a moment, he had a lot to do with the future of what became the college. This is in the Williamsport Cemetery on Washington Boulevard, the boulevard that runs right by the college. It's several blocks east. This is Creever and his wife Susan. And the obelisk, there's another obelisk at the other end, is for a faculty member who came on board that very first fall they opened. They opened with 4 faculty, and by Christmas had 8 faculty, because the student body just, it was a flood of students. So Creever decided to be buried here. So this is sort of important to the college as his cemetery. There was a time when on his birthday, the student activities committee or the dean's office took flowers and had a brief ceremony there. I don't think that's happened in recent times. In 1968, the Methodist Church decided that there were so many Methodists in central Pennsylvania, they would do something administratively. The Methodists in this part of the state were part of the Baltimore Conference, and then the East Baltimore Conference. But they decided to create a Central Pennsylvania Conference. As part of the conference, the Baltimore Conference, the clergy belonged to something called the Preacher's Aid Society. And the Preacher's Aid Society was an organization to help clergy and their families who were in medical straits or some other kind of related difficulty. But there was another reason for what I'm about to say. When the Baltimore Conference closed, someone did a study of how many clergy were in Pennsylvania. And those clergy, the Preacher's Aid Society, got a share of the funds that were available in the Preacher's Aid Society and the Baltimore Conference. There was another concern, and Creever was at the heart of this, and that is the school had gone bankrupt in 1859, came out of bankruptcy in 1860 by becoming a stock company, selling stock. By 1868, people who were not Methodists were buying the stock. And so a group decided, what happens if, God forbid, the Episcopalians or the Presbyterians or someone else buy the stock and we lose it as a Methodist institution? It was never belonged to the conference. It belonged to the stockholders. The conference never paid for the college or adopted it. It was always belonged to the stockholders. And so they were very concerned in 1868 what would happen. So here's what they decided. A group of laymen, all of them from here, created a new Preachers' Aid Society for the Central Pennsylvania Conference and set as their goal to care for clergy that needed it and to buy the stock of the school. In 2 years, they owned it all. It became, the school became owned by the clergy of the Central Pennsylvania Conference. I am a member of that clergy. When I came into the conference for the very high dues of $1 a year, I became part owner of Lycoming College. And I remember going to annual meetings. 200 people showed up and voted on things like, how much toilet paper does the school need? You think I'm making that up, don't you? I'm not making that up. And so for 100 years, the preachers owned the school. And guess what? If you wanted to be a preacher, sorry women, we're only men, if you wanted to be a preacher, you could come here for next to nothing. In fact, the word was, you actually came here for nothing. You got full ride to come here. So this plaque stands outside the Fine Arts Building and is a remembrance of the Preachers' Aid Society's role, a very important part of our history, because for about 100 years, among other things, we produced a lot of clergy. In 1955, when John R. Long retired, over half the clergy in the conference had either come to the seminary or the college. That's 150, 75 people. President Edward J. Gray became president in 1874. Here he is left at his desk in Old Main, and there, right with a gathering, Edward Gray was a student here in the late 50s, 1850s. He is the first alum to become president of the institution. He was president for 31 years, and during that time, he and his wife Eva, she is the only president's spouse to be a graduate of the school. She graduated a year before him in the late 1850s. And so they directed the school, and during that time, Gray decided, with his wife's support, that this was more, the word wasn't invented yet, a junior college. And so he, as the president, began the sports program. He's the president that supported the literary societies that turned out to produce newspapers of various kinds. He's the president that supported community groups and focused on new programs. He's the president that added a building to Old Main, Bradley Hall, a hall for art and music. I've looked through the enrollments, almost all women. preparing to teach in art and music. Very few men enrolled in the courses. We actually have the salaries of the faculty from 1900 and 1905. The highest paid faculty member was a woman who ran those programs. So from no women in the academy early years to women. They were a very important part of this, and in her later years, Eva Gray often referred to this as an almost college. Those are her words. Or a junior college, despite the fact that junior college did not emerge until after 1900, when the University of Chicago created the first one. This is their daughter. She lived to be 14. I have her here because this is a way of saying in much of the seminary years, it was for children as well as teenagers and young adults. And the children were a vital part of it. She lived with her parents in Old Main. She went to school all through the years. At 14, she was a young woman, but she had a heart problem, and it proved to be fatal when she was 14. The stories of the other students coming to grips with her death are very moving, and we have a lot of those stories because it was a tragic time in the life of the school. President John W. Long, 1921. Some of you may remember him. Anybody here have a memory? Pretty far back now. In the teen years, the World War I years, the seminary was able to survive because very few of its students were draft age. They were in what we would call their 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th year of high school, their first year of, quote, extended time. And so a new president came on board. His name was B.C. Connor, Benjamin Connor. He's the second alum to be president of the school. He had been a student in the 1860s, and he was a very effective person. In the summer of 1921, he became ill and died unexpectedly, completely unexpectedly. And so the board needed to find a new president. John Long went to Dickinson College. He had a roommate named Robert Rich. John Long went into the ministry. Robert Rich went home to run something called Woolrich Woolen Mills, about 20 miles from here. John Long, in 1921, still a relatively young man, was pastor of the Methodist Church across the street from Pennsylvania State College. It was not Pennsylvania State University till 1953, which I found surprising, but it was Pennsylvania State College. In fact, the seminary played Pennsylvania State College in football in 1900 something. We lost. But anyway, he was pastor of that church, a large church. He had in fact founded a Wesley Foundation at his church. It was due to open in the fall of 1921. One Sunday morning in late August, early September, into his congregation walked his former roommate Robert, Robert's father, who was chairman of the board of the seminary, and several other seminarians to hear him preach. I don't have the details except for this. Long left a note that said, "I saw who was in the audience. I suspected why they were there. I changed my sermon." I would love to know what he was going to say, and I'd love to know what he said. Yeah. Driving home, the senior Rich, Michael Bond, MB Rich, chairman of the board, apparently turned to his companions and said, "I think we found a president." Contacted him. Long never got to see Wesley Foundation at Penn State open because he agreed to become president. He's the longest serving president in the college's history, 34 years. He served that long because he wanted to serve longer than Gray. So he stayed on a few years when he maybe, well, we won't go there. But he had a vision. And his vision was that Greater Dickinson, as it had come to be called locally, needed to become a four-year college. That was his vision. This is the chairman of the board that hired him, Michael Bond Rich. He also was chairman of Woolrich Woolen Mills. That's a Rich family on the right. Michael Bond Rich is on the upper right, and Robert Rich is on the lower right, sitting down. If there is a family in the college's history for whom the college has an incalculable debt, it is the Rich family. They sent their sons and daughters here. Robert Rich had 4 daughters. They all came here. And some of their names are here, the names of the people they married. And so Michael Bond, he came here. And he was in about 10th grade, and he came home at the end of the year, and his dad said, "How's it going?" And Michael said, "Well, it's going okay." He said, "Good, quit. It's time you come and learn the business and run it." So that's what he did. I investigated. Do you know that before 1900, a graduation rate as low as 10% was considered high, even at the Ivy Leagues? People did not go to college to graduate. They went to college to get ready for their careers. And when they decided they wanted to be a lawyer, they quit and read law. Or a doctor, they quit and went to work with a doctor. Or own a business. In this case, hey, come run the business. Okay, I'll run the business. This is the first gymnasium, Hilltop Gym. When we came here, my wife and I, we went to games there. There was a very solid wall at one end, right under the basket. We noticed that opposing players had no experience avoiding running into the wall. Unfortunately, later on, the ruling was you had to have a legal-sized gym, and we built one in Lomity Gym, which will be involved with yesterday already and tomorrow. But this became the Fine Arts Building in 1983 under the leadership of President Bloomer. Without moving an inch, John Long became president not only of the seminary, but of the junior college. These are the bulletins. The bulletins contain the names of all the students, the curriculum, the faculty, wonderful sources. And in 27, 28, it's Williamsport Dickinson Seminary. In 28, 29, it's Williamsport Dickinson Seminary Junior College and College Preparatory School. The cost was losing all the children. They stopped having classes for children 8th grade and under. So that was the price quota, so to speak, of shifting the focus into this direction. Robert Rich became board president in 31. His father had completed a history of Woolwich woolen mills, come to Williamsport to get copies, was driving home, had an automobile accident in which he died. There was no succession policy among the trustees. Robert Rich went to the next trustee meeting with an offer of a gift on behalf of the Rich family and his father, and he said to the board, "Who's going to be your president?" And they said, "Well, we've already elected you." He said, "Me? I was just elected to Congress." "Well, you'll have to decide." So he did both. And he was in Congress from 31 to 43 and from 45 to 51. And he and his former college roommate, president of the school, were joined at the hip. They saw things alike. We have a lot of correspondence between them. And Rich was a very important figure. And the politics didn't hurt because he knew where the money was. There's a story there I don't have time to tell. Mary Landon sitting at the piano. Some of you remember her, Mary Landon Russell. Her husband is in that group. She was a student here and then on the faculty. She married her husband, who went from here to West Point. She was married at West Point. He was assigned to pilot school in Georgia and died in a plane crash almost immediately. They were married very few, maybe 2 months, 3 months, something like that. And so John Long reached out to her and said, "Look, come back." She came back on the faculty and had a very long career as the key to the music department and music program. Anybody remember Mary Russell? A number of you do. She was a wonderful person in the college and a leader of the faculty when I came here in '69. John Long laying the cornerstone of Clark Chapel in November of '38, as I said, the only building built during the junior college years. This is the campaign committee for Lycoming College in 1947. That's Long on the left, and the man 3 to his right is Charles Scott Williams, the judge, who served on the board and who wrote the first real history of the school in 1959. Clark Chapel, the first commencement of Lycoming College in 1949, the first year of 4-year programs, 4-year students, was inside Clark Chapel. It moved outside shortly after this, but this is its initial. James Milton Skeeth, he came the same summer that Long did in 1921, professor of psychology and dean. He was, until relatively recently, the longest serving dean in the college, and someone else now is the longest serving dean of the college. And there you see him on the right. As a senior person, there is a Skeeth room in the psychology department that is used for a variety of departmental purposes, shall we say. On the left are sort of the 4 chief administrators. Robert Rich on the left, Fred Wirtz, who became president in '55, John Long, and G. Bromley Oxen, the Methodist bishop. who joined the trustees in 52, 6 weeks after testifying before the House Un-American Activities Committee. He had been accused of being a communist, and, pardon my French, he told them a version of "go to hell." Then he wrote a book, "I Protest," in which he said in the book, "You're just wrong." He was evidently persuasive. The committee voted that he had no communist connections whatsoever. But he'd been president of the Federal Council of Churches, and everybody knew that was a communist organization. On the right is Robert Ewing, professor of history, and I ended up teaching many of his courses. Emily Beakley, who worked in the president's office, described him as the voice of God. Now, in 1951 or 2, a student approached John Long and said, "We ought to have the outstanding student of the year. We ought to select someone." Long thought that was good, got approval of the leadership of the school, support for it, and the big question was, Chieftain of the Year. Does that mean women are not eligible? The students resolved that question the very first year when they elected Nancy Hall, the first chieftain. So I've counted. It's about 50-50. Interestingly, the chieftain this past year was Francine Bacon, another woman. So it's been pretty much 50-50. They have usually been remarkable individuals in many ways, not just in their student years, but also afterwards. John Long in 55, when he retired, his successor, Wirtz, on the right, was a pastor. Long lived only a few months. We had applied for permission to grant honorary degrees. It was granted in 55, and Wirtz had planned to make Long the first honorary degree recipient, but he died that winter before that could happen. Wirtz was a very interesting guy. I knew him quite well, I guess it's what to say. And he said, when he was elected president, he was Oxnam's candidate, by the way. When he was elected president, he and Long had a meeting in the president's office. And Long's advice was, now, young man, never hire anyone smarter than you. And I said to Dr. Wirtz when he told me that, what'd you think of that information? He said, it was the dumbest, stupidest information I ever received. He said, I'm a pastor. I don't know anything about college teaching. I don't know anything about administering a college. My goal was to hire the smartest people I could find and let them run the place. And that's pretty much what he did. There he is in 1968. He was president for 13 years, and the school built 13 buildings. We would not be the school we are today structurally without the vision of Wirtz. 13 buildings. One of those, you see on the right-hand picture, one of the things he did was to reinstitute the chapel program. One of those people was Martin Luther King Jr., who came in 1958. I have a friend who I went to high school with. She came here to college. Her name is Ruth Perry. And Ruth came here to school, African American, and she said, after King spoke, he asked to meet with the, quote, Negro students, the black students, and she said, I sat around a small table, there were not many of us, sat around a small table and had a chance to talk to Dr. King. What an opportunity. What a wonderful thing. Partly because Wirtz reestablished the chapel program. Trees on the quad. I think that's Dan Foltz you see there in the lower right. Dan Foltz is a very interesting person. And you see the quad up on the upper left. You see the small trees. Well, in 1961, Dan, a graduate, was working in buildings and grounds, and someone came to him on a weekend and said, I have a lot of trees, oak trees, young oak trees, there at State College. You'd have to have a truck to come get them. I'm going to just let them die if you don't want them. And he thought, well, yeah, we probably ought to have some trees. So he got a friend, he went and got them. And he got here and he thought, what do we do with these trees? Take a look at the size of the ball on those trees. Okay, what do we do with these? Well, we plant them on the quad. The problem was the president was not around. Nobody official was around. So he got a crew together and they planted the trees. He said, it dawned on me Monday morning when I got a call from the president's office, I might be in my last day of employment at Lycoming College. And so he was called in and Wirt said, are you responsible for planting those trees? Dan told me, yep, I am. He said, very good idea. We needed something like that. So the trees are Dan Foltz's gift to the school. And for that reason, we named the quad for him. And I thought that was a wonderful thing to do in 2016. Really a great thing. By the way, he met his wife here. Now, I'm over time. Do you have to leave?
No. No, but there is another presentation after this.
But in 15 minutes.
In 15 minutes.
We've got 15 more minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
The cafeteria and supper was in the basement of Clark's Chapel. By his junior year, Dan Foltz was head waiter. And he said, John, that meant something. I said, what did it mean? He said, it meant I assigned freshmen their tables. He said, I picked the 6 prettiest girls and put them at my table. And I married one of them. That's a great story. A wonderful story. This is a matrimonial bureau. We just don't know it. Or we don't advertise it much. This is Miriam Wendell standing there in a honorary degree. She was on the board just 2 years. She taught at Williamsport Area High School. She was well educated, had a master's degree, taught English, and after she retired, she was invited to the board. As I said, not a graduate, not related in any way, but very interested in education and obviously very persuaded that this new college that emerged in 1947-49 was a place worth investing in. So in her will, she left the college her father's business. It was called Lubricup. They made gaskets. By 1980, their gasket was the single best gasket used to shut off oil wells anywhere in the world. She left it to the college with one condition. It did not become the college's full property until her mother died. And until that time, funds from Lubricup were to support her mother's life. The college trustees met. What shall we do? Well, why don't we keep the company and run it ourselves? Really? Dan Foltz was relatively new to the board. He became one of the people involved in that. And so, her mother died in 1971. From 1971 for the next 10 years, the dividends of Lubercup came to the college as cash. It averaged a couple $100,000 a year. And then in the early 80s, Dan Foltz said, you know, we're not in the Lubercup business. We ought to sell it. I've seen copies of the $6 million check. The total endowment of the school was $4.5 million. The board made the following decision: to invest the entire amount in the endowment, more than double the endowment. If you add the dividends and the sale of the company, Miriam Wendell is responsible for over $9 million in philanthropic gifts, the largest single donor in the college's history. 2 years on the board. And yet, so, we have a Wendell Hall. We probably ought to have something a little more distinguished for her. And so I've heard a proposal rumbling around about naming it the Wendell Academic Center. This is what it's now, but Lamade Gym came on board in 1980. The former Hilltop Gym became the Fine Arts Center. David Argel, the class of 1980.
Sorry, I have to go.
I understand. I wanted to talk about a couple of recent students. Dave Argel was a Student Association of Lycoming College president for 2 years. There his picture is down in the lower left, second one in. When he ran for office as president of the Student Association, he said, I want to do two things. I want a student activities fee and a student judiciary. The then president said, we're not going to have a student activities fee, and we're not going to have a student judiciary. 2 years later, Argel outfoxed that president. Be careful, President. And the college introduced the student activities fee, the college activities CAB, the college activities board, and a student judiciary. He was named chieftain that year, 1980. He was elected to the state senate in 2009, where he still is. He's taught for some. And in the same class, Tom Woodruff is the only graduate I know that has been awarded an Oscar for Death Becomes Her, Best Visual Effects in 1993. He is, I think, agreed to be available to students. When he came to town, he built, are you ready for this? He built himself a house with a bat cave, and he has the Batmobile in his basement on a circular round table, so he can always drive out if he's needed anywhere. I'm not making that up. James Douthit, Inauguration, Bob Shangraw, another philanthropist, chairman of the trustees, and he and Jim Douthit worked very closely together, focusing on raising funds to endow the institution for its future. Recreation Center opened in 2003 and is now named the Kuiper Center. The Mary Lindsay Welsh Honors Hall. I think you know what the college has arrived because the Honors Hall is a, quote, no offense to anyone, an unnecessary building. It's necessary to recognize students and to honor them. But this is not like a cafeteria or a dorm. This is a separate hall. I went to a university that has a similar building. Yale has a little more money than we have. Okay? So this building is a really special place on campus. It's a signal. We are really someone different. We're a different place. The Douthit Commons, the Recreation Center renamed. We thank Doug, graduated the year before I came and was on the staff. And I recognized him almost immediately as not your ordinary person. He was really an important person on the student affairs staff. And we thank him for the stadium at the bottom, the Lynn Science Center, the Music Center, the dedication ceremony, the gateway, and the purpose we're all here, presumably, is to invite students to come as they're looking forward to their future and help them find their futures. Thank you very much. Ooh. I told you 50 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I needed a little more time.
Something I want to share with you was you mentioned about the age factor with the board. That was rescinded at the last board meeting. I just
Oh, I
wanted to
did
let
not
you
know
know.
that.
I wanted you to know that.
It should be.
Yeah, and
Speaking as someone who is beyond that.
well, here's the thing. So I am the last person to age out. They passed it after I had been at the same meeting,
terrible.
mind you. But now there's some talk about maybe revisiting with some people who still want to be involved. But I just wanted to tell you that because
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
That's good news.
So I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, good
well
to see you,
done.
Ron.
I was just telling Chip the other day, I have a picture of 5 chieftains at Kent's
Thank you.
inauguration.
Really?
Starting with Dave
Okay.
and ending with Rob Berger.
Hi there.
Hello. You don't recognize me anymore, do you?
I'm gonna get out of the way.
You
Help
did
me.
about 8 years ago when my daughter looked at this place, but
Okay.
I'm Fred Hickok,
Oh, yeah, right.
the
Okay.
youngest one.
The youngest.
Well, I'm not the youngest anymore, but I'm the youngest to go here. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's
my
right.
daughter went elsewhere, and my son didn't go